My name is Bradley Thompson, 67 years old, and until last month, I thought I knew everything about Eleanor, my wife of 42 years. We lived modestly in Portland, working hard for everything we had. When cancer took her, I was devastated. But at the reading of her will, her lawyer revealed something that changed everything. I was the sole heir to her secret $42 million estate. My son Jeffrey demanded I hand it all over to him. When I refused, what happened next shattered my world forever. Let me tell you where this story goes. Before I begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how my own son locked me out of my home and why he froze in shock when he saw who was standing beside me. Eleanor and I built our life together in Portland, Oregon. For 42 years, we lived what I always thought was a comfortable middle-class existence. I worked my way up to construction management at Wilson Building Corporation, overseeing projects throughout the Pacific Northwest. Eleanor worked as an art consultant for several galleries downtown. We owned a modest 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, drove sensible cars, and took one vacation each year, usually to the California coast. Nothing extravagant, but we were happy. Our son, Jeffrey, came along 7 years into our marriage. From the beginning, he was bright and ambitious, qualities we admired and encouraged. We saved enough to send him to a good college, and he graduated with a business degree from Washington State. That was when things began to change between us. After college, Jeffrey moved to Seattle and took a job with a financial services company. Over time, our phone calls became less frequent, his visits home rare and often hurried. When he did visit, he seemed increasingly preoccupied with material things. He would comment on our outdated furniture or wonder aloud why we didn't upgrade to a bigger house. Eleanor would just smile and say we had everything we needed. Jeffrey lived in a completely different world than ours. His social media showed a luxury apartment in downtown Seattle, expensive cars, and vacations to places Eleanor and I had only seen in magazines. Despite this apparent wealth, he would occasionally call asking for loans, claiming temporary cash flow problems or unexpected expenses. Eleanor always insisted we help him, no questions asked. What I never knew, what Eleanor never told me in 42 years of marriage, was that she came from extraordinary wealth. Her maiden name was Eleanor Blackwell, the only daughter of industrialist William Blackwell, whose manufacturing empire had been sold to a conglomerate in the 80s. Eleanor had walked away from that life before we met, wanting nothing to do with the family fortune. She never spoke of it, and I never knew. The truth only emerged after she was gone. Eleanor fought cancer for 3 years with remarkable courage. I was beside her every step of the way, from the initial diagnosis through countless treatments, holding her hand through the pain. Jeffrey visited only twice during those 3 years, both times for less than a day, claiming work obligations prevented longer stays. When Eleanor passed, she went peacefully in her sleep with me at her bedside. I called Jeffrey immediately, but he arrived 6 hours later, well after she was gone. At the funeral, I noticed something odd about Jeffrey. While I was drowning in grief, he seemed distracted, checking his phone repeatedly and asking pointed questions about when the will would be read. I also noticed he was wearing a new watch, something that looked expensive to my untrained eye. This struck me as strange since just 2 weeks earlier, he had called asking for $8,000 to help with what he described as crushing financial pressure. Eleanor had insisted we send it without question. 1 week after the funeral, we gathered in the office of Thomas Gordon, Eleanor's attorney. I had never met Thomas before, had no idea Eleanor even had a personal attorney. Jeffrey brought his wife Amanda, a woman who had visited us only 3 times in their 8-year marriage and who always seemed bored in our company. Thomas began the meeting with a solemn expression. Before I read the formal will, Mrs. Thompson left a letter to be shared with you both. He handed me an envelope with my name, written in Eleanor's familiar handwriting. The letter inside changed everything I thought I knew about my life partner. My dearest Bradley, it began. If you're reading this, I've left this world, but not before ensuring you'll be cared for. I've kept a secret from you our entire marriage, one I hope you can forgive. I was born Eleanor Blackwell, sole heir to my father's fortune. I walked away from that life before we met, wanting to live authentically and be loved for myself. Over the years, I never touched my inheritance, allowing it to grow to $42 million. I've left it all to you, my love, with hopes you'll use it to find joy in your remaining years. Our son has his own path to walk. All my love, Eleanor. The room fell silent as I tried to process this revelation. $42 million. A fortune she had kept secret for over 4 decades of marriage. I felt a complex mix of shock, confusion, and a strange sense of betrayal, wondering why she had never trusted me with this knowledge. When Thomas formally read the will, confirming I was indeed the sole beneficiary of Eleanor's entire estate, I heard a sharp intake of breath from across the room. Jeffrey's expression transformed instantly from performative grief to intense focus. Amanda reached over and squeezed his arm, their eyes meeting in silent communication. As we left the attorney's office, Jeffrey draped an arm around my shoulders, something he hadn't done in years. "Dad," he said with newfound warmth, "we should talk about this. About what Mom would have wanted for all of us." I simply nodded, too overwhelmed to respond. I needed time to process not only my grief but this startling revelation about the woman I thought I knew completely after 4 decades together. The days following the reading of the will passed in a blur of confusion and grief. I remained in our modest home, surrounded by Eleanor's things, trying to reconcile the woman I had loved with this new information about her secret fortune. I found myself angry at moments, wondering why she hadn't trusted me enough to share this part of herself. Then guilty for feeling angry at all when she had just gifted me security beyond anything I had ever imagined. Jeffrey began calling daily, sometimes multiple times per day. His tone had shifted dramatically from our usual distant, obligatory conversations to one of intimate concern. "Dad, I'm worried about you all alone in that house," he would say. "Why don't you come stay with us in Seattle for a while? Amanda and I have plenty of room." I had visited their Seattle apartment once, years ago. It was a sleek, minimalist space with uncomfortable furniture and no guest room. The invitation rang hollow. 3 days after the will reading, Jeffrey and Amanda showed up unannounced at my door with takeout dinner and forced smiles. Amanda, who had previously shown little interest in anything about my life, suddenly wanted to know all about my health, my hobbies, my plans for the future. "Bradley," she said, the first time she had ever addressed me by name instead of a mumbled him or your father when speaking to Jeffrey, "you must be overwhelmed handling such a large estate." Jeffrey has extensive experience with financial management. He could really help you navigate this new situation. Over dinner, they casually mentioned an amazing investment opportunity Jeffrey had recently discovered. With just a few $1,000,000, they explained, the returns could be extraordinary. They painted a picture of yachts and vacation homes we could all enjoy together as a family. Throughout the meal, I noticed Jeffrey checking his phone frequently, looking increasingly anxious with each glance. When I asked if everything was all right, he quickly brushed it off as work stress. The following day, Thomas Gordon called to check on me and invited me to lunch. During our meal, he revealed something troubling. "Bradley, I feel I should inform you that your son contacted me this morning. He was asking about the timeline for the transfer of assets and whether there were any conditions or restrictions on the inheritance." Thomas leaned forward, his expression serious. "I also think you should know that I've received some concerning information. Your son has accumulated significant gambling debts, upwards of $300,000. This comes from a reliable source connected to several casinos in Las Vegas where Jeffrey is apparently well known." The revelation stunned me. Gambling debts? Jeffrey had always been so critical of wasteful spending, lecturing Eleanor and me about our lack of financial acumen whenever we declined to invest in his various schemes. "Be careful," Thomas warned. "In my experience, sudden wealth can reveal true characters and intentions, particularly among family members." When I returned home, I found Jeffrey waiting on my porch. His usual polished appearance had slipped, his eyes bloodshot, his expensive shirt wrinkled. "Dad, I need to talk to you about Mom's money," he said, not even bothering with pleasantries. "I think we both know she would have wanted me to manage the estate. You've never dealt with this kind of wealth." I invited him inside, made coffee, and listened as he outlined his plan to help me manage the inheritance. It involved immediately transferring a significant portion to accounts he would control for investment purposes. "Jeffrey," I said finally, "I need time to process all this. I'm not making any financial decisions right now." His calm facade cracked instantly. "You can't handle this kind of money, Dad. You've worked in construction your whole life. What do you know about wealth management?" "I know enough to take my time and get proper advice," I replied evenly. He stood abruptly, knocking over his coffee cup. "This is exactly why Mom should have left the money to me. You're going to waste it all on bad decisions." I was shocked by his vehemence. "Is there something urgent about your need for this money, son?" Jeffrey's face flushed red. "That's not the point. The point is that I'm educated in finance and you're not. Then you should understand my caution," I said quietly. He stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Minutes later, he called, his voice suddenly apologetic, blaming his outburst on grief. But something had shifted between us, revealing a desperation in my son that frightened me. 1 week after the revelation of Eleanor's fortune, Thomas suggested I visit the Blackwell estate, which was now legally mine. Located in the countryside outside Portland, the property had been maintained for decades by a small staff while sitting mostly unused. As I drove through the wrought iron gates, I felt like an intruder in someone else's life. The house was a stately colonial revival on 15 acres of manicured grounds. Inside, it was elegant but not ostentatious, filled with beautiful art and furnishings that somehow reflected Eleanor's taste, despite her never having lived there during our marriage. I was greeted by Maria Vasquez, the estate's housekeeper for over 30 years. A warm woman in her 60s with silver-streaked black hair, she welcomed me with unexpected familiarity. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "Mrs. Eleanor spoke of you often when she visited." This revelation stunned me. "Eleanor came here? During our marriage?" Maria nodded. "Several times each year, usually when you were away on business trips. She would spend hours in her father's library or walking the grounds. She said it helped her feel connected to her past without being consumed by it." Maria showed me through the house, sharing stories about Eleanor's childhood, painting a picture of a thoughtful, independent girl who had often clashed with her traditional, controlling father. In the library, Maria pointed to a hidden panel that contained several leather-bound journals. "Mrs. Eleanor kept these here. Perhaps they will help you understand." Alone that evening, I began reading Eleanor's private journals. Her earliest entries spoke of suffocation in her privileged world, of wanting authentic experiences and relationships uncomplicated by wealth. Later journals, dated during our marriage, revealed her ongoing struggle with her decision to keep her background secret. "Bradley works so hard," one entry read. "Sometimes I watch him come home exhausted from a construction site, and I question my choice. I could end his physical labor with one phone call. But then I remember how wealth warped everyone around me growing up, how no relationship felt real. Bradley loves me for me. Our life together is genuine. I can't risk changing that." I was deep in these revelations when a commotion outside interrupted my reading. Jeffrey's Audi had pulled up, and he and Amanda were getting out, looking around the estate with appraising eyes. Maria appeared in the doorway, clearly displeased. "I told them you were not receiving visitors, but they insisted." I went out to meet them on the front steps. Jeffrey brushed past my greeting, his eyes darting around the property. "So this is what she kept from us all these years," he said, his voice bitter. "All the times we struggled to make ends meet, all the times I had to take out student loans, and she was sitting on all this." "We didn't struggle, Jeffrey," I corrected him. "We lived comfortably." "Comfortably?" he scoffed. "You have no idea what real comfort is. This," he gestured broadly at the estate, "this is what we deserved all along." I invited them in, despite Maria's disapproving look. As we toured the house, Jeffrey and Amanda exchanged glances at various valuables, occasionally whispering to each other. Their behavior made me increasingly uncomfortable, as though they were mentally cataloging items rather than appreciating the history around them. Over an awkward dinner prepared by Maria, Jeffrey pressed again about our inheritance and how we should leverage these assets. When I remained non-committal, tension filled the air. After dinner, Amanda asked to use the restroom. When she didn't return for 20 minutes, I found her in one of the bedrooms, opening drawers and closets. "Just admiring everything," she said quickly. "This house has so many beautiful things." Later, as Jeffrey and Amanda prepared to leave, she pulled me aside while Jeffrey retrieved something from their car. "Mr. Thompson," Amanda said quietly, glancing toward the door to ensure Jeffrey couldn't hear. "There's something you should know. Jeffrey has a gambling problem. It's gotten worse over the past few years. He's in deep with some dangerous people. That's why he's so desperate for the money." Before I could respond, Jeffrey returned, and Amanda's demeanor instantly changed back to polite indifference. The next morning, I called Thomas and asked him to meet me at the estate. When I shared Amanda's revelation, he wasn't surprised. "I've done some additional digging," Thomas said. "Jeffrey has maxed out multiple credit cards, taken second and third mortgages on his condo, and borrowed money from several high-interest lenders. He's underwater financially by at least $700,000, possibly more. Why wouldn't he come to me for help?" I wondered aloud. "Because he knows you would want him to address the underlying problem," Thomas replied. "From what I've gathered, he's been hiding his addiction for years, including from his wife until recently." That afternoon, I called Jeffrey and invited him back to the estate, alone. When he arrived, I suggested we walk the grounds together. Among Eleanor's beautiful gardens, I broached the subject as gently as I could. "Son, I know about the gambling debts," I said. "I want to help you, but not by just handing over money. I'll pay for the best addiction treatment program in the country. I'll help you rebuild after that." Jeffrey stopped walking, his face contorting with rage. "You think I have a problem? My only problem is a father who got lucky marrying rich and now wants to control me with mother's money. This isn't about control," I tried to explain. "It's about getting you real help." "I don't need help," he shouted. "I need what's rightfully mine. Mother would have wanted me to have that money, not you. You never appreciated her, never understood her background, never deserved her." His words cut deep, especially as I struggled with my own feelings about Eleanor's deception. Had I truly known my wife? Had I appreciated her completely? As Jeffrey continued his tirade, painful memories surfaced. I remembered all the baseball games I had attended while he showed minimal interest in my presence. The camping trips where he spent the entire time on his phone. The countless times I had tried to connect with him only to be met with indifference or outright disdain. Later that evening, after Jeffrey stormed off, Thomas called with disturbing news. "Bradley, Jeffrey contacted me again. He's threatening to contest the will, claiming Eleanor wasn't of sound mind when she made her final arrangements. It's a baseless claim, but it could tie things up in court for years." That night, my first spent in Eleanor's family home, I sat in her father's library surrounded by the books she had grown up reading, feeling overwhelmed by grief, betrayal, and the painful fracturing of what family I had left. 2 days later, I drove back to our Portland home to collect more clothing and personal items. I had decided to stay at the estate temporarily while figuring out my next steps. The familiar neighborhood felt different somehow, as though Eleanor's revelation had altered even my perception of our shared past. I pulled into our driveway, noticing Jeffrey's car parked at the curb. I hadn't given him a key to the house after Eleanor died, so his presence surprised me. Using my key, I entered quietly through the back door. The sounds of someone rummaging through papers led me to the small home office Eleanor and I had shared. There stood Jeffrey, frantically going through file cabinets, drawers overturned, documents scattered across the floor. "What are you doing?" I asked, startling him. He spun around, clutching papers in his hands. "Dad, I was just looking for some family photos, for the memorial video I'm making." The lie was transparent. On the desk lay Eleanor's will and financial documents I had brought home from Thomas's office. "Those aren't photos, Jeffrey," I said, keeping my voice steady despite my rising anger. "Put those papers down and tell me what you're really doing here." His facade crumbled, replaced by cold calculation. "Fine. I'm looking for information about Mother's accounts, trusts, anything that might help me claim what should rightfully be mine. The will is clear, Jeffrey. Your mother left everything to me because she didn't know what you were really like," he shouted, his face flushing. "All those business trips where you claimed to be at construction sites, The late nights, the secretive phone calls. You think I didn't notice? You think Mother didn't notice? His implications stunned me. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you manipulated her, isolated her from her family wealth and connections, kept her in that middle-class prison so she would depend on you. You never deserved someone like her. You've never deserved wealth or privilege. Each accusation felt like a physical blow. The construction trips had been real. The late nights were spent working overtime to provide for our family. The secretive calls had been surprise arrangements for anniversaries or birthdays. Jeffrey, I said quietly, your mother and I had a good marriage built on mutual respect and love. We chose our lifestyle together. I never knew about her family money until after she died. Never. Convenient story, he sneered. A construction manager marries an heiress who just happens to keep her fortune secret from him for decades. No one is that selfless or that stupid. You knew. You manipulated her. And now you're stealing what should have come to me. His words revealed how little he understood either of his parents, how little he knew about love that wasn't transactional. I want half of everything, Jeffrey demanded. Transfer half the estate to me, or I swear I'll contest the will. I'll drag your name and Mother's through every court in the country. I'll tell everyone how you isolated and controlled her. I can't do that, son, I replied. Not just because it would violate Eleanor's explicit wishes, but because giving you millions while you're struggling with gambling would be like giving an alcoholic a warehouse of liquor. I want to help you, not enable you to destroy yourself. Jeffrey's face twisted with rage. He stepped toward me, invading my personal space. This is your last chance, old man. Sign over half the estate to me, or you'll never hear from me again. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of husband you really were. The threat of losing my only child forever hung in the air between us. Yet I knew Eleanor had made her decision for a reason. I knew giving Jeffrey unfettered access to millions would only accelerate his self-destruction. I'm sorry, Jeffrey. I can't do that. But I will always be here to help you get the treatment you need. We can find a way forward together that doesn't involve just handing over money. Treatment. He spat the word. I don't need treatment. I need what's mine. He shoved me hard, sending me stumbling backward against the wall. Photo frames crashed to the floor, glass shattering around my feet. For a moment, shock froze us both. Jeffrey had never been physically aggressive toward me before. The line he had just crossed seemed to surprise even him. Get out of my house, I said, my voice shaking. Your house? He laughed bitterly. Nothing in your life has ever really been yours, has it? Not your success, not this house, not even your wife. You've been living off Mother's charity your entire pathetic life. He stormed past me, intentionally knocking my shoulder hard. At the door, he turned back. This isn't over. You'll regret choosing money over your only son. That night, alone in the house filled with memories, I looked through old family albums. Jeffrey as a toddler on my shoulders at the park. His high school graduation with Eleanor and me flanking him proudly. The increasingly rare holiday gatherings where he seemed present in body but absent in spirit. When had I lost my son? Had he always seen me as somehow beneath him, unworthy? Exhausted, I fell asleep in my recliner, only to be awakened at dawn by the sound of my cell phone ringing. It was our neighbor, Mrs. Glendale. Bradley, dear, I think you should come home right away. There's something wrong at your house. I drove back immediately, my heart pounding with dread. As I turned onto our street, I saw what had alarmed Mrs. Glendale. My belongings, clothes, books, personal items were scattered across the front lawn. The locks on the doors had been changed. Taped to the front door was a handwritten note. You chose money over family. Now you have neither. Stay away, or I'll file for a restraining order claiming I fear for my safety after your violent outburst. We both know who the police will believe, the successful financial advisor or the delusional old man. Standing amid the ruins of my life, watched by curious neighbors, I realized I was now effectively homeless, locked out of the house I had helped pay for over 4 decades. My son had declared war, and I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a fortune I had never wanted. With nowhere else to go, I returned to Eleanor's family estate that afternoon. Maria greeted me with quiet concern. helping me bring in the few possessions I had managed to salvage from the lawn. "I am so sorry, Mr. Thompson," she said, arranging my things in what she now referred to as your room. "Please, call me Bradley," I replied, feeling oddly formal being addressed as Mr. in the midst of such personal chaos. "Bradley," she amended with a gentle smile. "Mrs. Eleanor always spoke so highly of you. She would be heartbroken to see what her son has become." Maria's kindness and the quiet dignity of the estate became my sanctuary in the days that followed. I informed Thomas of what had happened, and he immediately began legal proceedings to reclaim my property from the home Jeffrey had essentially stolen. But my heart wasn't in the fight. The house held too many memories now tainted by recent events. "The legal process will take time," Thomas warned. "Jeffrey is claiming the house was promised to him verbally by Eleanor. It's nonsense, but it could drag on for months." "Let him have it," I said, surprising myself with the decision. "The house, the furnishings, all of it. I can't go back there now." Thomas looked concerned. "Are you sure? That house represents 40 years of your life." "The house is just a structure," I replied. "The life Eleanor and I built is in my memories. Jeffrey can't take those." With that decision made, I began to truly settle into the estate. Maria introduced me to the small staff, a groundskeeper named Robert who had tended the gardens for 20 years, and a part-time cook named Lucia who came 3 times a week. They welcomed me without question, as though Eleanor had prepared them for this eventuality. One rainy afternoon, Maria mentioned a room I hadn't yet seen. "Mrs. Eleanor's studio is in the East Wing. She spent most of her time there when she visited." I hadn't known Eleanor had a studio here. In our Portland home, she had converted a small sunroom into an art space where she worked on small projects, mostly watercolors and the occasional sculpture. I had always admired her talent, but never thought of her as a serious artist. The studio Maria led me to was vast, with north-facing windows that filled the space with perfect light even on a cloudy day. Easels held half-finished canvases. Tables were covered with sketches, brushes, paints, and clay tools, and the walls every available space was hung with completed works. I stood speechless, taking in painting after painting. They were extraordinary, showing technical skill and emotional depth I had never seen in the casual works Eleanor had shown me. More shocking was the subject matter. Dozens of canvases depicted scenes from our life together. Our first apartment, the backyard of our Portland home, me working at my desk, sleeping in our bed, playing with Jeffrey as a child. Maria stood quietly, allowing me to absorb the revelation. She was very talented, yes, but she would never show these publicly. She said they were too personal, too revealing of her heart. "I never knew," I whispered, moving from canvas to canvas. "She never told me about any of this." "Mrs. Eleanor said you appreciated her for herself, not her family name or her talents or her money. She treasured that above all things." In one corner stood a large canvas covered with a cloth. When I approached it, Maria touched my arm. That one she finished just before she became too ill to paint. She said it was for you when the time was right. Carefully, I pulled away the cloth. The painting showed Eleanor and me, sitting together on a bench overlooking the ocean, our backs to the viewer. Our elderly bodies were leaning against each other, silver-haired but still recognizable. We were watching a sunset together, hands intertwined. Though our faces weren't visible, the sense of peace and contentment was palpable. In the corner, Eleanor had painted a small inscription, "The future we earned together. All my love. E." I broke down then, sobbing uncontrollably in front of this vision of a future we would never share. Maria quietly left the studio, giving me privacy in my grief. For hours, I sat surrounded by Eleanor's art, feeling closer to her than I had since her death, yet more acutely aware of her absence. The studio became my refuge. I spent days cataloging Eleanor's work, reading her artist journals, discovering a creative life she had kept separate from our shared existence. Rather than feeling betrayed by this secrecy, I felt privileged to now know this deeper dimension of the woman I had loved. 2 weeks after I moved permanently into the estate, Thomas called with concerning news. "Bradley, someone posted photos of you at the Blackwell estate on social media. They've gone somewhat viral locally. with people commenting on Eleanor's secret inheritance and your sudden wealth. Jeffrey has seen them. The next morning, Robert the groundskeeper hurried to find me in Eleanor's studio. "Sir, your son is at the gate with another man. They're demanding entry." They seemed quite agitated. From the security monitor in the main hall, I could see Jeffrey's Audi at the gate. Jeffrey himself pacing alongside a professional-looking man carrying a briefcase. I instructed Robert to let them through, then asked Maria to call Thomas immediately. Jeffrey and his companion, a slick-looking attorney named Warren Phillips, stormed into the foyer minutes later. "So this is how you've been living while claiming you can't help your own son," Jeffrey sneered, looking around at the elegant surroundings. "Quite a sacrifice you're making." "What do you want, Jeffrey?" I asked tiredly. Warren Phillips stepped forward, extending a business card. "Mr. Thompson, I represent your son in this matter. We are prepared to file an emergency petition alleging elder financial abuse and undue influence regarding Mrs. Thompson's will. We have evidence suggesting she was not mentally competent when making her final arrangements." "That's completely false," I replied, anger rising. Eleanor was sound of mind until the very end. "Nevertheless," Phillips continued smoothly, "such allegations could freeze the estate for months, even years, while being investigated. However, my client is prepared to forego legal action if you agree to an immediate and equitable division of assets." It was a transparent shakedown, but one that could indeed cause tremendous complications. As I considered how to respond, the doorbell rang again. Maria hurried to answer it, returning with Thomas Gordon, who I had called earlier. But to my surprise, 2 additional people accompanied him. A dignified woman in her 60s with silver-rimmed glasses, and a younger man carrying a large portfolio case. Jeffrey's face went pale at the sight of them, particularly the woman. "What is she doing here?" he demanded, taking an involuntary step backward. Thomas stepped forward. "Mr. Phillips, I presume? I'm Thomas Gordon, executor of Eleanor Thompson's estate. I believe we should all sit down. There are some aspects of Mrs. Thompson's will that haven't yet been fully disclosed." We gathered in the formal living room, an uncomfortable assembly of conflicting interests. Jeffrey and his attorney sat stiffly on one sofa, while Thomas directed the silver-haired woman and her associate to chairs opposite them. I remained standing, too agitated to sit. "Before we begin," Thomas said, "let me introduce Dr. Sarah Williams, who was Eleanor's therapist for the past 7 years. Jeffrey shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact with Dr. Williams. "And this is Michael Chen, Eleanor's estate planning specialist," Thomas continued, indicating the younger man with the portfolio. Thomas turned to Phillips. "Your claim of mental incompetence won't stand up to scrutiny, Doctor. Williams met with Eleanor weekly until 10 days before her death and can attest to her mental clarity throughout her illness." Dr. Williams nodded. "Mrs. Thompson was remarkably lucid and deliberate in her decision-making, right until the end. In fact, she specifically discussed her estate planning with me on multiple occasions, expressing concern about the potential impact of sudden wealth on her son, given his history." Jeffrey's attorney leaned over to whisper something, but Jeffrey brushed him off impatiently. Michael Chen opened his portfolio and extracted a USB drive, which he inserted into a laptop he had brought. Mrs. Thompson recorded a video message as part of her estate planning. She requested it be shown if there was any dispute regarding her wishes. The large television screen on the wall illuminated, and suddenly Eleanor was there. My heart clenched at the sight of her, thin from illness but still beautiful, her eyes clear and determined. She was seated in this very room, wearing the blue cardigan I had given her for her last birthday. "Bradley, my love, if you're watching this, then something has happened as I feared it might." Her voice was weaker than I remembered but resolute. "Jeffrey has challenged my wishes regarding the estate." She shifted slightly, adjusting a blanket over her lap. "I need to explain some things I never told you, about Jeffrey and about why I made the decisions I did. First, you should know that Jeffrey has struggled with gambling addiction since college. I discovered this when he was 22, after he called me secretly asking for $50,000 to pay off debts, begging me not to tell you. Against my better judgment, I used some of my personal funds to help him, making him promise to get help. Jeffrey's face had gone from pale to flushed with anger, but he remained silent as his mother's posthumous revelation continued. He didn't get help. Over the years, I've bailed him out multiple times without your knowledge. Each time, he swore it would be the last time. Each time, he refused therapy or addiction treatment. I blame myself for enabling this destructive pattern. Eleanor looked directly into the camera, her eyes seeming to meet mine across time. Bradley, I kept this from you because Jeffrey threatened to cut off contact if I ever told you. He was ashamed for you to know, and I was afraid of losing our son completely. I was wrong to keep such secrets in our marriage. This is my deepest regret. Tears were streaming down my face now, matched by the tears visible on Eleanor's cheeks in the recording. As for my family wealth, I kept it separate from our life together because I wanted us to build something real, uncontaminated by privilege or entitlement. When I saw what affluence without purpose did to my parents, to their friends, to the children I grew up with, I vowed to live differently. She smiled sadly. I watched you work hard every day, and sometimes I questioned my choice to keep the money separate. But I saw how you took pride in what you earned, how you valued what you worked for. I didn't want to take that from you. Perhaps this too was wrong of me, but it came from love, not deception. Eleanor straightened, her expression becoming more serious. Now, regarding my estate, Bradley, I have left everything to you because I trust your judgment completely. You earned that trust through 42 years of integrity and love. Jeffrey, she continued, now addressing our son directly, as though she knew he would be watching. I love you, but I cannot enable your self-destruction any longer. If you're watching this, it means you've tried to challenge my will, likely because of your financial situation. I've created a trust that can help you, but only under specific conditions. You must complete a residential treatment program for gambling addiction. After that, the trust will pay your living expenses and provide a modest income, but only if you maintain sobriety and attend regular therapy sessions. There are provisions for education, health care, even to start a legitimate business, but you will never have direct control of the principal. This is not punishment. It is the last loving act I can offer you as your mother. The recording ended with Eleanor saying, Bradley, forgive me my secrets. They were the failures of a woman who loved her family too much to risk losing them, even at the cost of complete honesty. The room was silent after the screen went dark. Jeffrey sat completely still, his expression unreadable. His attorney looked distinctly uncomfortable. Thomas cleared his throat. As you can see, Mrs. Thompson was very clear about her intentions. The trust she established for Jeffrey is generous but conditional. Dr. Williams spoke gently, addressing Jeffrey directly. I worked with your mother for years on her feelings about your addiction, Jeffrey. She carried tremendous guilt about enabling your behavior. This trust structure was her way of finally offering real help instead of temporary bailouts. Jeffrey stood suddenly. This is all very convenient, isn't it? Everyone ganging up against me with carefully rehearsed statements and videos. Mother was manipulated in her weakened state. She wasn't thinking clearly. Jeffrey, Dr. Williams said quietly, you and I both know that's not true. We've met before. 3 years ago, when your mother convinced you to attend one family therapy session, you stormed out after 20 minutes and refused to return. And you told her everything I said in confidence, Jeffrey shouted. You violated patient confidentiality. No, Dr. Williams corrected calmly. You weren't my patient, as you refused treatment. Your mother was my patient, and I helped her navigate her distress over your situation. I finally found my voice. Jeffrey, I had no idea about any of this. Not about your gambling, not about your mother helping you financially. If I had known, I would have done anything to help. Help? Jeffrey scoffed. You mean control me? Judge me? Like you always have? No, I said firmly. I mean support you in getting well, like I'm offering to do now. The trust your mother set up is more generous than you know. Thomas showed me the details. It would cover a top-tier treatment program, then provide for your needs while you rebuild. Jeffrey's lawyer, who had been quietly taking notes, leaned over to whisper in Jeffrey's ear again. This time, Jeffrey listened, his brow furrowing. After a brief whispered exchange, Phillips addressed Thomas. My client needs time to consider his position in light of this new information. We'll be in touch regarding next steps. As they prepared to leave, I approached Jeffrey. Son, please, let's not fight anymore. Let me help you the right way. For a moment, something vulnerable flashed in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by cold anger. This isn't over, he said quietly, before following his attorney out. After they left, Thomas, Dr. Williams, and Michael Chen explained more details about Eleanor's arrangements. The trust for Jeffrey was indeed generous, covering comprehensive addiction treatment, followed by living expenses and educational opportunities. Eleanor had thought of everything, creating a structure that offered help without enabling destructive behavior. She loved him deeply, Dr. Williams explained. In our last sessions, she was most concerned about how her inheritance might affect him without proper guardrails in place. As our meeting concluded, Dr. Williams handed me a card. Eleanor asked me to offer my services to you as well, Bradley. Processing grief is difficult enough without these additional complications. I'd be honored to help if you're interested. I accepted the card gratefully, suddenly feeling the weight of everything that had happened. As Thomas and Michael prepared to leave, Thomas paused. One last thing, Bradley. Eleanor left instructions about the estate itself. She thought you might want to use it for something meaningful rather than just living here alone. Something that could honor her memory while helping others. Just something to consider. That evening, sitting in Eleanor's studio surrounded by her art, an idea began to form in my mind. I picked up her final painting of us growing old together by the sea, a future we would never share, and felt a sense of purpose slowly taking root. The next 6 months brought profound changes to my life. After much consideration, I decided to transform part of the Blackwell estate into an art therapy center, inspired by Eleanor's secret passion for painting and her concern for others struggling with addiction and loss. Working with Dr. Williams and a team of art therapists, we converted the East Wing, including Eleanor's studio, into a space where people could heal through creative expression. We kept many of Eleanor's paintings on display with her journals available for reading, turning her private artistic journey into inspiration for others. I used a portion of the inheritance to establish a foundation in Eleanor's name that would ensure the center's operation in perpetuity. Thomas helped navigate the legal complexities, and Maria enthusiastically embraced the new purpose of the estate she had maintained for so many years. Mrs. Eleanor would have loved this, she told me one afternoon as we watched a group of veterans participating in a painting workshop. She always believed art could heal wounds no medicine could touch. Jeffrey remained distant during these months, refusing my calls and having his lawyer handle all communication. Through Thomas, I learned that Jeffrey's financial situation had deteriorated further, with creditors beginning aggressive collection actions. I continued to leave the door open for him to accept the treatment option, maintaining the trust exactly as Eleanor had structured it. Then one rainy Tuesday morning, Maria came to find me in the library. Bradley, your son is at the gate. He's alone this time. I found Jeffrey waiting in the foyer, soaking wet from the rain, looking thinner and more haggard than I'd ever seen him. The expensive watch and designer clothes were gone, replaced by worn jeans and a faded sweatshirt. Dad, he said simply, his voice hoarse. I wanted to embrace him but hesitated, unsure of his reaction. I'm glad you're here, son. I lost everything, he stated flatly. The condo, the car, my job. Amanda left 6 weeks ago, took whatever wasn't nailed down. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it sincerely. Would you like some dry clothes? Something to eat? He nodded, following me silently upstairs. After changing into clothes I provided and devouring the sandwich Maria prepared, Jeffrey seemed to find his voice again. I hit rock bottom last week, he admitted, staring into his coffee cup. Lost $30,000 in one night trying to win back enough to pay some guys who were threatening me. Ended up sleeping in my car until it got repossessed. He looked up at me, his eyes hollow. I need help, Dad. The kind Mom wanted me to get. The relief I felt was overwhelming. The trust is still there, Jeffrey. Everything Eleanor set up. We can call the treatment center today. 2 days later, I drove Jeffrey to Clearview Recovery, an exclusive residential treatment facility specializing in gambling addiction. As we pulled up to the entrance, he turned to me, his expression fearful in a way I hadn't seen since he was a small boy afraid of thunderstorms. "What if I can't get better?" I placed my hand on his shoulder. "You can, and I'll be here every step of the way." The following months were difficult but hopeful. Jeffrey committed fully to his recovery program, participating in therapy, group sessions, and even incorporating art therapy techniques based on recommendations from Dr. Williams, who consulted with his treatment team. I visited weekly, our conversations gradually evolving from awkward and guarded to cautiously open. During one such visit, about 4 months into his treatment, Jeffrey brought up Eleanor's video message. "I was so angry at Mom for exposing my addiction like that," he admitted. "But she was right about everything. I've been running from myself for so long, using money to fill some hole inside me. Your mother loved you deeply," I told him. "Everything she did, even keeping secrets, came from that love." Jeffrey nodded slowly. "I'm starting to understand that. I'm also starting to see how I blamed you for things that weren't your fault. It was easier than admitting my own failures." As Jeffrey's treatment progressed, I continued developing the Eleanor Blackwell Art Therapy Center. By the time Jeffrey completed his 6-month residential program, the center was fully operational, serving veterans, addiction survivors, and grief support groups. Upon his release, Jeffrey moved into a small apartment in Portland, paid for through the trust. As part of his continuing recovery, he began volunteering at the center 3 days a week, discovering an unexpected talent for administration and program development. 1 year after Eleanor's passing, we held a formal opening ceremony for the center. Jeffrey stood beside me as we cut the ribbon, our relationship not fully healed but mending gradually with each passing day. That evening, I showed Jeffrey Eleanor's private studio, where I had kept some of her most personal works, including the final painting of us growing old together by the sea. "I never really knew Mom, did I?" Jeffrey said quietly, studying the painting. "I thought I knew her completely, after 42 years of marriage," I replied. "But she contained depths I never glimpsed. Perhaps that's true of everyone we love." Over time, I distributed portions of Eleanor's inheritance to causes she had cared about, keeping enough to maintain the center and provide security but finding more satisfaction in giving than in keeping. Jeffrey, under the structured support of the trust, completed a counseling certification program and eventually became a peer support specialist for other gambling addiction survivors. The estate that had once been a source of conflict became a place of healing for hundreds of people each year. Eleanor's art and journals inspired others to use creativity as a path through their darkest moments. 2 years after that terrible day when Jeffrey had locked me out of my home, we sat together on the estate's back terrace, watching the sunset. "I think Mom would be proud of what we've built here," Jeffrey said. "I think she would," I agreed. "Not because of the center itself, but because we found our way back to each other. The fortune that had nearly destroyed our family had, in the end, provided the pathway to healing, not through the wealth itself, but through Eleanor's wisdom and how it should be used. The true inheritance she left wasn't the money, but the lesson that genuine connection and honesty are worth more than any amount of wealth." If this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a family conflict over money or inheritance? How did you handle it? Sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most important healing. Please like and subscribe if you found value in this story, and share it with someone who might need to hear that reconciliation is possible, even after terrible betrayals. Thank you for spending this time with me, and remember that it's never too late to rebuild what seems irreparably broken.